Welcome, everyone, to the Contact Center Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And we have a very special guest today, Harini Gokul. And Harini, you are the Chief Customer Officer at Entrust. You've worked at places like Amazon and Microsoft, and you have a very interesting perspective on the whole customer experience delivered through contact centers. And it ties right into the title today, which is Accountability and Positive Impact on the Bottom Line. If you wouldn't mind explaining a little bit more about your background, but just kick us off in terms of how you think about growth, the contact center, impacting P&L to get us started, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve, for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation. Having sort of grown up in and around customer experience and customer care all my professional life, my one insight or takeaway is customer engagement, customer experience, customer care that is delivered via so many channels, including contact centers, are a vehicle for growth. As a football fan, I think of customer care as an offense mechanism, not defense. And that is the journey I've been on over the past 20 years or so now to change the perception of customer care and delivered via contact center from a defense, let's go there when there's a problem perspective, to offense, how do we harness the insights and intelligence we get from customers proactively to drive growth for our business and also drive growth for our customers.
What you're doing here is amazing because you're reframing the entire conversation in the industry, because most contact centers are looked at as cost centers, something that we look at and we say from a board level, from the CEO level, your level, how do we just maintain or reduce costs? Because it's one of our biggest operating expenses in the business. So how would you address somebody that has that mentality, that looks as a cost center? Because what you're portraying here is so incredibly different. You're like the offensive coordinator calling plays in from the sideline. That's fantastic. How do you start to try to change that mindset?
Yeah, I would start by asking them a question. Tell me about a time when you were at your worst and someone helped you out. How do you feel about them after the experience? And I find that to be the door opener or the perception changer question, Steve, because many times, most times, by the time a customer comes to a contact center, they've tried all other options. They are at a place where they need help, and they need help with a sense of urgency. And that team in the contact center that's helping the customer navigate and address their problem has an incredible superpower to change the tenor of the conversation, the way they react, the support they provide, the assets they create and share with the customer, all help transform the customer's experience of the organization he, she, or they are engaging with. And there's research and statistics that prove that recovering a customer through a dissatisfied experience or through an escalation ends up translating into much higher growth. So the customer who experiences this escalation with you and then comes out more happier, more satisfied, will go on to spend and do more business with you. And that is the direct correlation between delivering great customer experience via the contact center and your top line group. And this is why I care so deeply about this being an offense play, this being a growth play. And that's a question I would ask in the dialogue I would have with somebody at a cocktail party who asks me why I care about contact centers as deeply as I do.
It's interesting because in the C-suite that you're a part of, there's all kinds of strategy that happens. No matter what time of the year, we're looking at next year. How are we going to grow? What are the levers that we're going to pull? How are we going to achieve X% growth this coming year? To my knowledge, and I've been involved in a lot of C-suite conversations and strategy conversations, I have yet to hear somebody at the table talk about how through our customer experiences, that is an offensive mechanism, a
Yes.
growth strategy. We talk about products. We talk about trends, macro trends in the industry. We talk about competitive issues that are happening. We talk about product extensions and things. But what you're talking about is the contact center, the customer experience should be part of the organization's actual growth plan.
Absolutely. Think about the world we live in, Steve. Do you watch Netflix or Amazon?
both.
right? For example, regardless of what you watch, you're in a SaaS consumption world. What happens if Netflix doesn't have the show you like? You go to Amazon.
Sure.
If Amazon has a series you love, you come back to Netflix, right? So our customers have a lot of choices these days. They have a lot of options. And these options are not only consumer options like Netflix or Amazon, but they translate into commercial options as well. What is important for a customer, a B2B enterprise commercial customer these days, is value. In an age where there is more constraints on cost, we are all under more constraints this year than we were the previous year, and so on and so forth, where the cost of capital is increasing. A dollar today is more expensive than a dollar yesterday because of all the macroeconomic conditions. There's more and more pressure to show value for the things we purchase. And that is really what is changing this conversation, is helping me reframe this discussion of customer experience and customer care being a driver for growth. Because at the end of the day, the products may be excellent, but if a customer is not able to find value from that product or service, the propensity for them to move away increases. And we know that getting a new customer is 5 times more expensive than retaining a customer. So then, from a math perspective, what happens? We care about retaining a customer. If we care about retaining a customer, what follows? Value. Because what does a customer care about? Value. So when that follows, then everybody who's delivering value to that customer immediately become growth accelerators. And that is where the role of customer experience and customer care and engagement via the contact center take prominence. Because a customer is not looking for, oh, you're my call center, you're my customer success manager, you're my salesperson. They look at all of the points of engagement and say, you guys figure out your act together, right? I see you, I see one organization. And so that drives us to work more seamlessly across the functions, to share intelligence, to share insight across the functions, to help deliver that value to the customer. So I think this move to SaaS, move to a consumption usage business model, has really put the focus on customer experience, because that is the way to deliver value.
It's 5 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than it is to expand the relationship with an existing customer. And benchmarks are usually around 30-40% of new revenue in the coming year when we're strategically planning should come from customer expansion. If that's the truth, then we should be thinking significantly about how we are expanding those customer relationships. And yet we have agents talking every single day to these customers.
Exactly.
That is the front line.
That is the front line. And then the question becomes, how do we create a closed loop? How do we take that frontline intelligence with our teams building those products and services so we can provide them feedback? How are you using my product? How are you using my service? And what can I do better for you based on the feedback we get from customers? So I think of the contact center and that engagement as being the canary in the coal mine that sort of raises their hand and says, this is going to be an issue at some point, or this is going to be an opportunity for us, let's get on it. So building those systems of connection among our teams is going to be mission critical to drive that expansion you talked about, which in turn drives the growth we talked about.
Now, you just introduced a really important concept, which I do not want to just pass over. You're literally talking about agents being consultants to other departments, informing them with intelligence coming directly from the customers themselves.
Yes.
Now, in my mind, that puts the role of the agent, and with everything you've been saying, from here to here in terms of the quality of the agent that you're trying to hire, the amount of training, the amount of support, the amount of face time they have with other different departments. Yet in the industry, there's still horrendous agent turnover rates. It's been an ongoing problem so long that it's almost like an accepted evil. We're just going to have to put up with it. But if you had to say, and I'm going to ask you to rate this question if you could, if on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is addressing agent turnover to the overall growth, as you've been talking about, the vitality of the organization? 1, it's not important at all. Agent turnover is not important to the growth of the company. 10, it's vital to the positive impact and the growth of the company. Where would you rate that and why?
It's such a great question. And I think on a scale of 0 to 10, I would say 8 is the importance of agent tenure and legacy and history for me. Having that center of gravity that understands the customer and their pain points and opportunities and can feed that back to the rest of the organization. So the number is 8. And I think there's so much nuance there because we have an opportunity to do better by our contact center colleagues. We have an opportunity to invest in skills. We have an opportunity to both reskill and upskill our colleagues and our talent so that they can actually help our customers in a more effective, efficient way. And that goes hand in hand with leveraging the technology and the innovation that's coming our way. So I'm a big proponent of agents are super important, mission critical to our purpose, and we need to continue investing in them with skills investment, with capability investment, and leveraging the innovation that's out there to help them do their jobs in a more frictionless way, in a more efficient way, in a way that gives them joy.
Now, if you were, and I love this, and I'm sure that the agents that work in your organization already know and feel this, but agents are, they don't feel heard most often. They don't feel like they have career progressions. They feel like AI is coming and going to steal their job. So they're temporary, like they feel anything but valued in the way that we're talking about here in general. I'm not talking about in trust in your agents, but in general in the industry, that's the case. If you take that last part, this is a major issue with agents. Is AI going to replace my job? What's your opinion on that?
Someone who's been in technology and seen a few of these inflection points play out, the one to the cloud was the big one. And this question has been asked before, Steve, and we're all still here, right? Will the cloud take my job? As somebody who embraces technology, the way I think about it is we need to find a way for technology to help us deliver on our goals better. How do I leverage AI or other technologies for hyper efficient customer care that actually meets a customer where they are in this omni-channel experience while retaining the responsiveness and the personal contact that customers require? So I do believe technology is a tool, but it is a means to the end. And the end is how do we serve our customers better? And the teams like mine that embrace that and think of technology as a friend and as a means to the end, we're already seeing that we're able to do more for our customers than we did before. And we're able to do more for our teams because our teams signed up to do rich, complex engagements with customers. So a lot of the rinse and repeat, the simple, how do you fill an Excel sheet type work is not what gives them joy. They want to be with customers more. So I'm always thinking, and my leaders are always thinking, how do we get our teams more time with the customer? What could we help reduce in terms of busy work for them that can help them get that customer exposure? So I think of embracing technology to get to these outcomes, both for the customer and for our internal teams.
You keep saying some really important things here. Did I just hear you say that you want to increase average handle times? That's one of those key metrics that usually, if we're trying to reduce costs and we're trying to save costs, because one of the biggest overhead, we're not trying to usually increase average handle times. But I understand in the concept or the context that you're talking about here is sometimes it's in the better interest of the business and the growth of the business to spend the time with the customer to solve their problems, turn around and actually use that as a growth opportunity, not oh, I'm being judged on my average handle times. I'm going to get in trouble if my average handle times go up. So how do you consult with the agents then in terms of the KPIs that they're being measured on?
And this is a great conversation. And we're working on what good looks like when we embrace digital, when we embrace this omni-channel experience, when we embrace how to constantly engage in more complex cases. Because you're right, as the simpler things go away, it does mean the more complex cases that require more agent attention come to us. And yes, that is a trade-off we have to make where average handle time or resolution time may go up. But as long as we know that it goes up for the right reasons, we're comfortable with that. I think metrics are only as important as the means they serve. Metrics by themselves don't say a lot. It's in the context of the business you're trying to manage and the customers you're trying to serve. So I'm very pragmatic, and our leadership is very pragmatic to say, What are the new metrics we need to reflect good in this new digital world?
Was that an education with the rest of the C-suite and the board in terms of enlightening them that there is a reason for a whole new set of metrics? We're not throwing everything out. Nobody's getting rid of CSAT scores or anything, but how we look at this
Yeah.
and how we judge this has to be changing.
Yes, and the benchmarks change. What does the benchmark look like for more complex products versus simple, complex versus engagement? And I'm very fortunate to have a very open and supportive board and leadership team that is very much about let's stay informed and educated and do the right thing by the customer. But I would say, as long as people know you're doing the right things, let's look at technology. Let's look at different ways to help our talent get skilled? Are we constantly investing? Are we looking at ways to build capabilities out? Folks are comfortable that we will measure the right things.
I want to ask you one thing that I'm curious about whether this is one of those evolved metrics or in some way to measure. Keeping agents happy. And as they're the front line here, we had talked in our previous conversation about culture and how important culture is. Is that one of those evolving metrics that we need to be thinking about, whether it's a hard metric or not, but as a benchmark, how we're creating culture, how that's impacting the frontline experience, how it's impacting growth? Is that part of the evolved set of metrics or benchmarks that you're looking at?
Absolutely. I think the culture piece is so key. And that is the reason we are successful because we have a culture of being customer first. And when it says being customer first, then you work backwards and say, what does that mean? It means that when a customer comes to you and says, I prefer to chat with you than to be on the phone, we respect that. And we are customer first from that engagement. We do what it takes to make sure that we meet a customer where they are, we deliver what is needed, but it's absolutely about the culture to start by focusing on what the customer wants and working backwards from that. And I think that's helping reframe the conversation everywhere when you think about it as a cultural strategy, a broader customer strategy, as opposed to this is what we do for contact centers.
That makes sense. In our previous conversation, I remember you talking about, and we put it into the title of this episode about accountability and positive
Yeah.
impact on P&L. Tell me about this accountability part. How are you holding yourself accountable to this growth engine that we're talking about here?
I'll make it a little bit more generic to say, in order to be a driving growth, we need to be accountable for numbers, quotas, and metrics that accrue up to those growth. They come in many different ways. But one that I've found helpful is for contact center teams to have support and maintenance agreement P&L. Anytime you buy hardware, you get a support maintenance agreement with it. For the contact center team to hold that and deliver against that goal often is a powerful accelerator and is a powerful way to focus the team on the goal ahead. It is only one thing in addition to everything else, in addition to thinking about the types of cases we've solved, the insight and the learnings. And that's my second big focus. There is so much insight, learning, pattern matching that happens. How do we take that back into our teams and how do we reward our teams for doing that? For creating knowledge based articles, for writing blogs, for showing thought leadership as they do this work with the product teams. So all of those, we think about accountability in multiple ways. The quantitative way by carrying, I like the idea of carrying a software maintenance quota and then a thought leadership accountability that gives them a seat at the table to have a more rigorous product discussion with.
I love that you talked about thought leadership because each one of these customer interactions is also an opportunity to help educate, not just the product of the SaaS technology itself, but to get them to think differently to help reframe the conversation, like you mentioned a couple of times here. I had never thought about that as a part of the role of the contact center. Could you expand on that just a little bit more?
Absolutely. I find that when you think about delivery teams, whether they're professional services teams that are implementing and deploying solutions with the customer, or contact center teams that are hearing feedback from the customer and often helping them get activated or sort out challenges with activation, there's incredible learning on how we build products, on how we build services, and how we can better build products and services to meet our customer needs. But we lack often a mechanism to take that back. Taking that and saying, if I see it across 5 customers, there's a scale here. I'm seeing it at scale. How do I capture that, write something that addresses the problem, and then find a long-term systemic fix for it are both pieces that's going to be important. I work in very deeply technical, complex solutions, and I find that our contact center is one of our most technical colleague bases. There's a lot of technical expertise, and people have pride in sharing that technical expertise and building on it. And this is one way publishing thought leadership, talking about it with forums, talking about it with our product teams is one way to help them have pride in their work as well as share their work and build respect for their work.
Is there a connection then with marketing that
Yeah.
loves to produce thought leadership?
Yeah.
And tapping into, as a former CMO myself,
Yes.
I have never thought about going to the contact center as a source, a great source for thought leadership. And I've been in the business for a while. Thank you for sharing that idea. I think anybody who's watching here is a contact center leader, chief customer officer. That's just one more example, a number of things that you're doing that the contact center can provide great, incredible value back to other different departments. What haven't we talked about? We've gone through quite a bit here, but what haven't we covered that you would want to say, "Hey, Steve, I really want to make sure that I've made this point."
I think we've covered a lot of ground. The piece I'll leave us with is we need to be a learning culture, Steve. For the function to evolve, for the function to live up to its potential, we need to be learning. We need to be embracing of new trends, new technologies, new way to do things. And I think that will be the key for a contact center to thrive, just not survive in a cloud first, SaaS first.
If people were listening and they said, "I believe this is what I want to do," what is your suggestion on maybe the best way to get started? There's certainly a starting place in order to make these kind of systemic changes in an evolution in how we're thinking about adopting new technologies, working with other departments, driving growth in the organization. Where does it start?
It starts by listening, I think. So, as an example, in many of the orgs I've worked with, we will have C-level leaders do a tour of duty with our contact center to listen to customer feedback. And I find that it's very powerful being able to listen real time to what your customers are saying about you. So, if you were to start anywhere, start by listening to what your customers are saying about you.
Fantastic. I know we could go on forever, but if people did have follow-on questions, would it be appropriate if we perhaps give them a link to your LinkedIn profile?
Sure. Yeah. That's a good way to start as well.
Hari, thank you so much for all of these insights and expanding the way that we're thinking about the role of customer experience, the contact centers, and how it could impact every level of the organization, right down to bottom line revenue, the profit and loss statement of the company. That is certainly not prevalent in terms of the perception of the contact center and the role in most organizations. So I thank you for bringing that to light in such an articulate way.
Oh, thank you, Steve. I appreciate this. This is, like I said, I grew up in this role when we all did customer success before our roles were called customer success. And so I have a deep appreciation for the strategic nature of the work and the human first nature of this work. And I'm excited to talk about it and share a little bit more.